Hey everyone, my name is Jared King and welcome to The Read. Today I have a very special guest. Two of his poems were included in the anthology For Colored Boys, which was edited by Keith Boykin. The book won the American Library Association's Stonewall Book Award. He has read at the prestigious Aloud Reading Series produced by Central Library in downtown Los Angeles. His novel, A Love Like Blood, won the 2016 Lambda Literary Award, also known as the Lammys, for LGBT debut fiction. Ladies and gentlemen, Victor Yates. Hey, Victor.
Hi, everyone. I hope you all having a great day. And thanks for having me, Jared. I really appreciate it.
No problem. So, how does it feel to win all of those awards for your work?
It has been an honor. My kind of like Ars Poetica, if you will, is kind of like my reason to write. And I write every time I sit down to write, I think kind of like breath and images. And so those are the things that help me to be a better writer. And I feel like they connect me to writers who I respect and to the writing community at large. So I think if everyone would sit down and write their reason for writing, they could potentially take their writing to the next level.
Very cool, very cool. Uh, what was it like growing up in Jacksonville, Florida?
I had a great childhood. I'm a very internal person, and so I would dream up these fantastical characters and I would destroy my toys to build these characters. So I always lived in kind of like this fantasy world. And I was allowed to do that. I had the freedom to do that. I think that translated into my writing. And it's a
Nice,
beautiful city. It's a beautiful city.
very cool. So, what was family life like for you?
I have a twin brother and an older sister. We're very different. My brother is very kind of like extroverted, the life of the party, and so is my sister, and I'm very introverted, and um, I'm not necessarily a wallflower, but I don't like to kind of like draw attention to myself.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and so I used to read a lot growing up.
And so that's kind of informed uh, kind of how you were brought up, huh? So you were always kind of reading. And
Yeah.
so did your family support your sexuality?
Um, so growing up, it was difficult for my mother to accept. I remember when my brother and I turned 14, we had this party, and my brother invited like all of his friends. And we had this kind of like glass sliding door in our living room that led to a balcony. And so um, everyone that we invited to the party was on the balcony. And my brother, being kind of like the person that he is, he turned off the lights on the balcony. And everyone was just dancing on the balcony. And so my mother said, if you go out to the balcony and dance with a girl, I'll pay you $40. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. So years later, she told me she knew at that moment that I was gay. And it's it's kind of difficult knowing that your family loves you, but it's not um, a love that is whole. They love part of you, and they wish that they could change, kind of like the you of you. And so that was really hard at times. So yeah, and it's something that you work on every day, trying to establish a better relationship with your family. Um, but it's so part of the reason why I wrote the book is that I wanted it to be kind of like a warning letter to parents whose children are LGBT. Um, it's a very difficult story. It's about it's a father-son relationship, and I want parents to know that, life isn't guaranteed. And if you have a child who's gay, lesbian, transgender, questioning, love them, because they might not always be there in your life. And so I really want more parents to read the book.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very powerful message, and we're going to talk more about that book very soon. But I have to go back to something I read on your website. So you mentioned in your bio you were a graduate of Otis College, then you won an award at Morehouse, then you received the Oprah Winfrey Scholarship. So what was college life like for you? That's a lot of different experiences for college.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, so for undergrad, I went to Morehouse, and my sophomore year, I received the Oprah Scholarship. And without that, I would not have been able to continue school. I don't know who I would be without Oprah's financial assistance. And so Morehouse was such a wonderful experience. It opened up this world to me that I didn't know existed. I actually majored in psychology. And so with psychology, you have to write a lot. And so I kind of like, I always wrote poetry growing up, but I think I gained a greater love of writing because of psychology. But I also entered this poetry competition while I was there, and I won first place. And that was such like a boost of confidence for me. And just after college, I just wrote and wrote and wrote. And so I wanted to become a professional writer, and that's why I went to Otis. And at Otis, I majored in creative writing. And the book that I wrote, A Love Like Blood, is actually my thesis project from Otis.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
I
and
didn't know.
so yeah, yeah, and so it helped me to graduate my program. And so I writing it for the program, I really learned the voice of the character through the writing workshop at Otis. And I'm so grateful to the experience I had at Otis. And in the acknowledgments, I acknowledge um, my creative writing mentors, the students in my program, and Oprah as well.
Very cool. So you, at some point, you moved from Jackson, Florida, out to LA, to Los Angeles. So when and why did you decide to move?
I moved because I couldn't get a writing job in Florida. I wanted to transition. At the time, I was working at a trade school, and I was trying to apply for any type of like freelance writing gig possible. I applied to hundreds. I didn't hear from any of them, and so I quit that job and decided to move out to LA just to become part of the greater writing community out here. And so I moved in 2011 at the very end of the year. And the thing that I tell people about LA is that LA, it really is kind of like this dream world, because whatever you want to do, you can do it here. And so I was able to book a number of writing gigs. I was able to place myself into the writing community. And that's when I decided to go back to school, because Otis is here. It's by LAX area, by the airport. And so I've had so many great opportunities here, and I just can't wait. Like, this new year has been so good to me in terms of like writing opportunities. And so I'm excited about what is to come.
Great. So, as writers, love is always a part of the story. So, what is your current relationship status?
I am in love with a very special man. His name is Victor Yates, and he means the world to me. Um,
I love that answer.
so yes.
All right, all right. So, what have I assume you've been? I assume you've been in a romantic relationship. If you haven't, then let me know. But what have your romantic relationships taught you, and how have they informed your writing? And if you haven't been in one, what have your other relationships maybe? How has that informed your
I think that the best writers can take events and experiences from their life to create a beating heart for their characters. And so I've been in a number of romantic relationships, and I think that the truest writing feels realistic, but fortunately for you and I, fiction doesn't have to exist in reality, but it has to feel realistic. And so a lot of the emotional intensity of relationships um, that I've experienced have made its way into a love like blood. Um, when I left Jacksonville, I was actually in a relationship and it ended very dramatically. And so on a holiday,
writing?
um, and so I Thanksgiving Day, I wrote an entire chapter out of just anger, and it's one of my favorite chapters right now. But I think that even if you haven't personally experienced something, if someone has told you something, use that emotion to make your character exist above the page and have a beating heart and be someone that the reader can say, I know this person, or I can visualize this person. So that's what matters to me, using emotion and using it well in writing.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about For Colored Boys for a moment. Um,
Okay.
so it's a collection of stories that's akin to the popular For Colored Girls. So how did your involvement with that project come about?
It's so funny. So that came about right when I moved to California. Um, and I think if you, whatever you want to do in life, you should tell people it's what you want to do. So all of my friends knew that I was moving to LA in order to kind of like become a part of the writing community. And so two really good friends actually emailed me um, this kind of like query from Keith Boykin about the book. And so I had written two poems that really just wrote themselves. And so I submitted these poems. And the thing that I love about that anthology is that there over 40 different gay men of color. They're Black, Latino, and Asian. And only two people in that entire collection have two pieces in that book. And that's Keith Boykin, the editor, and myself. So that was such an honor. And the two poems that I wrote, one poem, I was in New York and I was on a bus in Queens. And there were two Latino guys sitting on the bus beside me. This African guy got on the bus and he overheard their conversation and realized that they were gay. And he started screaming, burn, burn the fags. And so it kind of like paralyzed me to hear him say that. So I had to write a poem about that. So I wrote a poem about that. And then I wrote a poem about this preacher in Atlanta who was living a double life. And so those are two pieces that made it into the anthology. And I love the anthology. Some of my favorite writers are in it.
All right. So let's see. So you won awards for poetry and acceptance to getting 2 poems into For Colored Boys, and now you have this novel, and even it is filled with poetic-like prose. So I'm curious, would you consider yourself more of a poet or a novelist?
I do not consider myself to be a poet. I respect poets, and it's something that I am not. Nikki Giovanni is one of my favorite poets. Joseph Komunyaka, Octavio Paz. Um, there are so many brilliant poets in the world that I don't until I have written um, a book of poetry. I think I would be more comfortable calling myself a poet. But um, I'm glad that you stated that the book feels like poetry because my favorite authors are Toni Morrison is just brilliant and Samuel Delany, and they use these very specific poetic techniques to pull in the reader. And so I kind of borrowed some of their techniques for my own work. And I think um, poetry is essential um, to every writer. Just knowing various poetic techniques, um, reading poets. I think all like novelists should read the work of poets because it can change your life. Like there's so many wonderful poets out there that a lot of them have just inspired me.
Do you have like a favorite poem that kind of sticks with you?
Um, well, yes, Joseph Komunyaka. He has a poem called "Facing It," and I could read it every day. But it's about he was in the Vietnam War, and it traumatized him, and he saw a lot of death, a lot of gore, and the poem is about his experience going to the Vietnam War Memorial in DC. And so he's standing from this black rock, and yet he's having these flashbacks to the war. And he sees a name, and then he sees a man in uniform running past him, and kind of like it's kind of like graphic, but blood is spilling out the back of his head. And then he sees this woman kind of like doing a rubbing on the wall. And it ends with the woman isn't actually rubbing a name on the wall. She's brushing a young boy's head. And just that ending is so emotional. The language is so simple, yet it's so powerful. And I think that poetry has the ability to allow us to connect with other cultures, and it allows us to understand the power of language. And I love that you don't have to understand a different culture or language to know things that are like universal. And poetry teaches us that.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're getting into A Love Like Blood. So you released it last year, and
Mhm.
it won, as we said, it won the Lammy Award. But so what do you think made what was it about the book that made the judges pick this above all others?
I wish I knew that answer because like I would write towards that for the rest of my life. I think that the main character, his name is Karsten Tynes, and I think that Karsten is a character that people gravitate towards. he's only 17, but he's very intellectual. He's a photographer. Um, he acts more mature than someone his age, and he's really into um, really living the way that his father lives. And so he wants his father's love. He wants his father attention. Um, but the character has this major transformation. And I think that all great books, the main character has a transformation that is noticeable. So from page one to about, 100, you see that he has um, become the person that he didn't think he could become. And so I think that might have stood out for the judges. Yeah, but I wish I could answer that, but I don't know. I don't know. And maybe I think it's something about my love of poetry and just kind of like I love playing with language. Um, the there are a lot of themes in the book, and so words kind of like change meaning in the book, and so the idea of marriage kind of like changes in the book. Um, the idea of I love using the colors red and white because they're very symbolic. Um, I love kind of like vivid details that are kind of like very sensory rich. And so I think that the reader is kind of like pulled into this very familiar yet strange world. And so maybe that could have like stood out to the judges. And in some of the reviews, people have said that um, it's very strange the way that I write, but something about it really kind of like resonates with them. One reviewer wrote that they love the story, um, but it was so unusual that they really couldn't get into it. But they gave me this 5-star review, so I actually really love that. So it's I love writing that's very strange, that's very unusual, and so I love reading like experimental writing, and so maybe that stood out.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. When I read it, I noticed that it was very different in the way that you wrote. So yeah. I mean, I would assume that a lot of people it would kind of polarize people a little bit. But
Yeah,
you know, it's good to see that you had some reviewers who were still able to give you a 5-star review and have their minds open enough to kind of accept a different writing style.
yeah.
You know, um, so how will readers see themselves in this book? And by that, I mean like how like in terms of like diversity or some of the issues that the main character faces. How will characters kind of, or how will readers see themselves in the characters or reflect it
Um,
in their
I
own
think
lives?
I think it's a very universal story. It's a father-son relationship. Um, it's a story about immigrants. It's a story about a family that they're Catholic, but at one point they were Islamic. Um, it's a story about small business owners. And so there's so many kind of like layers to the story. And I think that people can see themselves in any of those layers. You know, if you've had a difficult relationship with a parent, um, the feeling of falling in love for the first time or the second time, the feeling of trying to find your way into the world. I think readers will find themselves um, in Karsten because he's a very likable character. He's very curious, and he really does kind of like see the world through his camera. His grandfather was a photographer. His father is a photographer, and he's a photographer. And he and his father, they own a photography business together. Um, and he has this very interesting way of just seeing the world through his camera. He likes to be behind the lens at all times, and the way that he focuses the lens kind of like shapes the world around him. And so I think um, it's a universal story, and it's a story that um, a lot of gay men, especially, can relate to. It's um, I don't think of it as kind of like a coming out story. I think it's more of a kind of like a coming in story about someone figuring out who they are and not necessarily just stopping with being okay with it, but trying to um, just force the world to kind of like see them as they are, if that makes sense. Um, and so, um, yeah, I think it's something that a lot of different people can also, even if somebody isn't gay, they can, I think they can kind of like relate to to Karsten.
Hmm. I like how you said it's a kind of like a coming in story. I thought that was pretty profound there. That was pretty good. Because usually, when you come out and then you kind of have to come back into yourself. You kind of have
Yeah.
to, so I thought that was pretty good. So and you've done very well with the book. You've gotten the award and you've gotten a lot of accolades for it. So I think you should be very proud of yourself.
Yeah.
It's, it's done a very good job. But now I want to ask, what are you working on now? What's next for you?
So I'm in the very beginning stages of a new project. I haven't written down a single word. I'm just doing the research for it now. If there are any writers that are watching this right now, I have a pro tip for you. So, um, with my last book, I didn't do any kind of like outlining of it, and so it just came to me. And so now I'm like, okay, I need to research the story more. And so I'm doing all of the research now to make it much easier for myself. And so I say outline, outline, outline. And in that outline, know who the character is, um, know their quirks, know their secrets, know what makes them tick, know what their favorite color is, know why you're writing it. That's a really important story. Know everything you can about the book and then start writing. Some people would kind of like cringe at that. Um, one of my friends, he writes um, the end of the book first, then the middle, then the beginning. That would drive me crazy because I don't even know. I know the ending of the story, but I can't write it until I've written the first part of the book. Um, yeah. So I'm just doing a lot of kind of like research right now. So yeah. So
Okay.
hopefully next year um, we can talk again so you can learn about that book project.
Okay. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am not a pantser. I like to outline. I like to work from the beginning to the end. I
Okay.
don't, and I like to know what I'm writing because I cannot sit at a computer and feel like I'm like wasted because I will feel like I'm wasting my time. Some people could do it. I
Yeah.
can't. So where can people find you? Where can they find your website, your social media links? Where can they buy the book?
Okay. So my website is Victor Yates at wordpress.com. They can purchase the book at Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. They can purchase it at iTunes, anywhere books are sold. You can get it anywhere. I'm trying to get it in bookstores soon. So, but you can only get it online right now. Um, and I'm on pretty much every social media platform. So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at writer Vic Yates. You can find me on YouTube at writer Victor Yates. But if you just do a general search, you'll find all of that stuff.
All right, sounds good. Victor, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. We've done a, I've had a blast. You've done a great job, so it was very good. And thank you so much for watching. Lastly, before we go, you can escape to a magical world full of intrigue and adventure. Click the card at the top of the screen and subscribe now to get a thrilling taste of my book, Pangea Unsettled Land. Thank you for watching. You guys have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.